and that most of your stuff is kitchen scraps, then maybe it makes sense to have your compost bin closer to your kitchen so that you're more prone to actually put stuff in your compost bin. And you figure your compost is going to break down by about 3/4. So if you start out with a pile this high, finished compost is going to be about that much. So I always like to locate it near my source materials because you're putting more stuff into it quantity-wise than you're going to get out of it. So when it comes to moving your compost to wherever you want to use it, there's less volume to move. Source of water. You want to keep your compost as moist as a wrung-out sponge. So when you add dry materials, especially, you might want to add water to it. Or if you're in the middle of summer and it's really a dry period, you might want to add water. But I don't find it's that inconvenient to carry water to a compost bin. In fact, if you've got a covered bin, what I do, and we're calling for rain, I just take the cover off. Let nature do it. Well, aesthetics. Do you want to look at a compost bin in the front of your yard? Probably not. It's, put it somewhere where it's out of the way. You don't have to look at it. Though some of us don't really mind looking at it. Avoid wooden buildings. And I had to look into that because I thought, why? Well, wood and water sort of don't go together too well. When they say avoid wooden buildings, they mean don't put your compost pile up against a building. It'll rot. Your building will rot. At least keep it a foot away, preferably 2 feet away. So it's not a big thing, but it's more common sense. You can have it near a building, but not up against the building. And away from trees and shrubs, unless you want to fertilize those trees and shrubs, give them the nutrients. Trees and shrubs are extremely opportunistic. I have had a compost pile near some trees, and it was amazing when you go to get that compost out of it, how hard it was to get the compost out of it. Those roots had gone right up into it, and they were holding on to it. It's like, you're not getting our compost, lady. So they will find your compost pile. They'll put those roots right up there. So if you want to use your compost for some other plants, take it away from the plants. If you are lucky enough to have huge supplies of materials, you might want to have it in your compost pile in an area where you can stockpile either browns or greens to add to your compost as needed. Like you might want to stockpile your leaves in the fall. Most people don't have too many greens to stockpile unless you're, taking your grass clippings. And I will say, generally, put your grass clippings back into your lawn. Mulch them back in. Don't stockpile your grass clippings. I know sometimes in the spring grass grows so fast that we do have to collect our grass because it gets too high, and if you just mow it, you end up with piles on the lawn. But basically, it is a good fertilizer for your lawn, so I recommend grass cycling instead. Just use a mulching mower and get the grass back into your own lawn. But you might have neighbors who bag their grass clippings, in which case you go and take their grass clippings and use those. And so if you do that, so either with leaves or grass clippings, you might need an area to stockpile things. So that's a consideration. And there are benefits of sun and shade. Some people, sort of like Republicans and Democrats, oh, you need to have it in the sun. No, you need to have it in the shade. There are pros and cons. So I say it's a wash as far as I'm concerned. If your compost pile's in the sun, it's going to heat up quicker. You're going to get the benefits of the sun heating it up, but the sun's going to also dry it out, which means you're going to have to be adding water to it. If it's in the shade, it's not going to dry out as quick because it'll be cooler, which means it might not get as hot as you want, and it might break down slower. So it's either or. I think it's just a matter of where it's most convenient for you. Ooh. What to put in, what not to put in. You've got your greens and your browns. There are good greens and browns, and there are some you don't want to put in. But just about your grass clippings, your leaves, your kitchen scraps, torn up newspaper, cardboard, twigs. Again, twigs and things, if you can, cut them into small pieces. Even plants. I mean, when I cut my plants up into small pieces because they break down quicker. Just like Mary Ann said, you don't want to throw that whole pumpkin into your worm bin. You don't want to throw your whole pumpkin into your compost bin either. It'll break down, but it'll break down quicker if you chop it up. Annual weeds, they're okay. Now, things you don't want to put in, dairy products. Now, these things, I'll tell you up front, a lot of the food products can attract rodents. In fact, as we see down here, kitchen scraps. I know I don't think it's a problem here in the mountains at all, but where I lived up in Maryland, there were some communities that you were forbidden to put kitchen scraps into your compost bin because they can attract rodents. I've never had that problem. My sister-in-law in Wilmington has, though. Yeah, my sister-in-law, who was a master gardener, she stopped composting because she took the lid off one day and there was a rat staring back at her. Never had that problem. Mice, rats. I mean, I could define rodents, but I think you're talking about only the ones that might bother with your compost pile.
If you live in the country,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Raccoons love compost piles. I've got one at home who is, darn, shrewd little son of a gun.
What about like bear?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Big rodents.
Yeah, big rodents. I've had trouble with all of them except the rats and the mice, but I had quick raccoon story. I kept going down every day thinking, darn, I left the lid open on my compost bin. I don't usually do that. Next day, left the bin open. Bin is closed. Next day, bin is open. My raccoon, though, is very neat. Does not make a mess. Goes in and takes what he wants. I have occasionally found a napkin or something lying around where, didn't put it back in the compost bin. The bin on my the lid on my compost bin, one can be impossible to open sometimes, and I find it totally impossible to ever leave up. He can open it, he can leave it up. It's like, how can you do that? I can't do that. And yes, the bear. Yeah, my husband said, the bear was down at your compost bin today. I said, I was down at my compost bin. This was about 1 o'clock. I said, at lunchtime, I went down and put stuff in it. Between my lunch and 1 o'clock, the bear came down and turned the compost bin over. So, yeah, it happens. Is it a big problem? I've had the bear do that twice, and not really. No. And as I said, my raccoon is extremely neat. So, and as long as it's not a rat or something. And the thing of it is, if you do put kitchen scraps in, they say it's ideal to bury them so that it can possibly ward them off. Yeah, right, tell that to the raccoon. Or help with the smell, because they'll start breaking down a lot quicker if they're already buried. But seriously, we don't want to put in dairy products or meat, chicken, fish, because that will definitely be attracting your rats and other critters.
Eggshells?
Oh, eggshells are fine. If you can, crush them up first, yeah. They're a great source of calcium. So they're good to have in there, but they're real slow to break down. You'll see them, years later. Fats and oils, they can gunk up your compost and make it smell, so keep those out. The invasive weeds and diseased plants, unless you know that you're going to have a hot compost pile which will kill those off, don't put them in, because home compost piles generally are not going to get hot enough to kill them off, and then you're going to take this wonderful compost, put it in your garden, and put diseases or weeds back into your garden. So don't take the chance. Better off to just throw those out. Bones, again, can attract unwanted critters, and they're going to be slow to break down. Now, animal wastes. Carnivores, we do not want their waste. Your cats, your dogs. Bird waste is a little iffy. But human wastes, because they have pathogens that can then go into the soil, go into our food, we eat it. So it's in a whole cycle. We don't want to put anything like that in. But horse manure, your herbivores, horse manure, cow manure, sheep manure, things like that, that's fine to put in. Pine needles. Pine needles are fine, except if you know anything about a Christmas tree or your Christmas decorations, you throw them out after the holidays in February, March, April, next January. They're still there. So pine needles, they're going to stay in that compost pile for a couple of years. So when you're harvesting your fresh compost and you're ready to use it, you're pulling that kind of stuff out and putting it back in your compost pile and hoping by the next year it's decomposed. So don't bother. It's not worth the hassle. Okay, what to do with your compost pile? It's a great soil amendment for your garden, for your house plants, for your containers. Yeah, I love the one, use 2 or 3 inches as a mulch. Yeah, right. If you got 2 or 3 inches of compost that you can use as a mulch, more power to you. That's wonderful. It's great. Half and half in your containers, if you can have that much. One thing to be concerned about is if you're using it as a seed starter, it's potent, and new seeds are delicate, new little plants. Don't use more than 1/4 or 1/3 of compost. 25 to 33% in with your soil starter, because it's a little too potent for your new seeds. Starting your compost bin. It's sort of recommended to put a layer of coarse material like twigs or branches on the bottom so that air can flow up and you'll get, help with the oxygen. Then you layer your materials, your greens and browns, keeping them moist as you add them if you're putting a lot of dry materials in, and then mix them together. Of course, if you've got a layer of twigs and things on the bottom, you might want to be careful about not going all the way to the bottom as you're mixing things, because it would be a good idea to keep some airflow through the bottom. Add some, if you have access to finished compost, when you're starting a new bin, take a shovelful of compost. Or if you've got a neighbor who would give you a shovelful of their finished compost, put that in. It sort of gives you a jump start on your compost, because it's got finished compost is just teeming with all these microbes. So by putting a shovelful of finished compost in there, it really gets that compost pile, gives it a jump start. Chip your woody materials. Again, surface area breaks down faster. If you've stockpiled your leaves, when you put your kitchen scraps in, which are your greens, put your browns in so you're sort of getting your equal mix. If you haven't stockpiled any leaves or anything, what I find, I've got my kitchen compost bin, where I put all my kitchen scraps, and then I take it down to the big bin. I throw paper towels and napkins in there. So I'm just constantly adding browns. And I also find it's a good idea to have a napkin or something in the bottom of my kitchen compost container, because any liquids that start forming, they get sucked up into the napkin or paper towel, and it's a little less messy. So, but it's an instant source of browns. And turn your pile. Compost tumblers are great. Forks are good too, but they just require a little more manual effort. You can almost not turn your compost pile too much. However, I think the last thing I read was 3 hours. No more than every 3 hours. Those, just like the worms don't want to be disturbed, your microbes don't want to be bothered too much. Yes?
I have a question for paper towels.
Yeah.
Do they have to be, can they be the white paper towels, or, I mean, that's bleach stuff, does that matter?
I use it all. I use colored ones, colored napkins, bleached paper towels. I put it all in there. It's all brown material. Yeah. Yes?
If something starts out green but turns brown, like say grass clippings or even leaves, do they become brown or are they still green?
I always figure when something totally turns brown, you know, you got your grass.
Yeah.
And if it sits in a pile of grass clippings, no, because it just turns into a big soggy mess. But if that grass is out there and turns into, like, this is going to sound real good, hay, grass doesn't turn into hay, don't shoot me. But, you know, if it gets tall and turns brown, then it's a brown. But not all brown. Yeah. But not all browns are browns. Coffee grounds are brown, but they're not browns. I always thought that was weird, the coffee grounds are greens. But it's the makeup, you know, it's the nitrogen in it, it's not the color.
But you can put coffee grounds into it.
Oh, coffee grounds are wonderful, absolutely. And the coffee filter too. Tea leaves, tea bags, yes.
So we can see the nitrogen
Yeah,
as well.
yes.
So if you're putting those things and balancing out the kitchen scraps, it's really,
No, kitchen scraps are greens.
okay.
Yeah, that's more green. Yeah, lint, and your vacuum cleaner. Of course. Well, there are those of us who reuse their bags and just reach in and pull all that stuff out.
What about the ash from the wood stove?
You can put that, but it can really throw the balance off because of the amount that you put in at a time. I prefer to just take that and just throw it out on the lawn. It's good on a windy day because then it really, you know.
What are the elements that ash contributes to the soil?
Oh gosh, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you. I'd have to research that. I think, yeah, potash. Yes, ma'am.
When I'm vacuuming in the house, I have these new wool rugs that
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the stuff comes up from the
Oh, of course, if it's a new one.
Okay to put on?
Sure, it's wool. Yeah, it's organic.
A nylon. No, these aren't nylon.
If they're wool rugs, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes,
Mary, just going back to talking about animal waste,
yes.
I had learned that you cannot eat animal waste from animals that have been treated for worms. Does anybody can?
I don't know.
Eat worms?
I don't.
You know, you don't want to use anything from a meat eating animal, for sure.
Right.
But if it's treated, we've got national gardeners, rightly or wrongly, that let chickens run around their garden full time.
Yeah.
There's some problem there, I don't know.
I'm talking about horse waste, and let's say your horses have been treated.
I don't know.
Dewormed,
The accepted is 4 months before harvest.
right?
So one that has 4 months to decompose and you can apply it to the garden.
Even if it's been dewormed, right?
Now, there's an exception to that, though. You need to know that
Exception to.
Right.
if the farmer has been using some herbicide, there's some carryover time, that it may be 18 months or 2 years before that herbicide is fully broken down. And your compost, that's so good for your garden, they'll kill your tomato plant.
And horse manure particularly is really full of weed stuff.
And that's another comment on the grass-eating animals, is you can get a lot of weeds through that.
Yeah. Troubleshooting. Now I'm going to just tell you, this probably is going to sort of seem like Greek. Once you get your compost pile going, you're going to look at it and you're going to say, oh, you're going to just know instinctively by what it's doing, what it's telling you it needs. If it's got a really rotten odor to it, it may just need more air. It might be too wet. Just like if you have, well, the next one is going to be the ammonia odor. Like if you let a pile of grass clippings sit and get all soggy and mushy, and they smell real good. So a lot of times it's just telling you there's not enough air in there. Of course, if it's just grass clippings, you need to add browns because you need your greens and your browns. Your grass clippings are just pure nitrogen, so you're going to need some browns to that. So it'll tell you, I'm too wet. Too wet. Maybe if I turn it and add some brown material, it won't be as wet. Duh. Or if it's too dry, gee, I bet you I need to add some water to it. Or if it smells fine, but you turn it and nothing happens, it's like, maybe if I put some nitrogen in there, put some grass clippings or some kitchen scraps in there, it'll start working. Other sources of nitrogen, besides your kitchen scraps and your plants, like at the end of the season too, when your house plants are dead, or not, maybe not even the end of the season, maybe when your house plants are dead if you've got a brown thumb. That stuff goes great in your compost pile. Sources of nitrogen, anything meal, blood meal, bone meal, all these things are good sources of nitrogen. So if it's fall and you've got tons of leaves to put in and you don't have enough kitchen scraps to offset it, you can just sprinkle blood meal or bone meal in there, and that will provide a source of nitrogen. Oh, okay. What if your compost pile is just